Wait a minute. Are you telling me that the FDA doesn't actually know if certain foods are generally seen as safe? Yup. Okay, this is a scary thought. So part of me is like, yes, let's do something about it. And part of me is like, oh my God, why haven't we been doing something about it? So, first thing, we need to talk about GRAS. Not just any grass. We are talking about GRAS. Okay. This is substances that are genuinely recognized as safe. Okay.
Right.
So, any product in your food has to be labeled as generally recognized as safe, aka GRAS. Now, this is what allows food manufacturers to basically, there's two ways to be considered GRAS. Okay.
Okay.
You can either petition the FDA to review an ingredient and then they give you this GRAS status, or you can self-affirm. Now, if you've been around on our podcast for a while, you know that I have a food conspiracy hat, that I am very much opposed to any food company self-regulating because they've only proven for the last 50, 60 years they don't do a good job. Okay. But there is a legitimate way that manufacturers can self-affirm that their products are safe based on a conclusion of a scientific expert panel. Okay.
Right.
And this is basically an exploited loophole. It's been there for a long time and it allows new chemicals into our food supply, often with unknown safety data. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're talking about all the little additives and emulsifiers and colorings and things like that. And you actually see a lot of these in quote unquote health foods. Okay.
Yeah.
You see them especially in foods that are trying to be alternatives, meaning things like plant-based or gluten-free or soy-free. There's, whenever you're trying to avoid something, you have to replace it with something else. Okay. Right. Now, there's the environmental working group, the senior vice president. He had a very interesting quote. He said, the most significant danger facing consumers is not the new food chemicals that escape any meaningful FDA review. The most significant danger is the thousands of chemicals that are already being used in our food without ever having been reviewed by the FDA or without having been reviewed by the FDA for many decades. And I have to wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
At this point, we've been on the planet a good amount of time. We've discovered a lot of the new ingredients and we've been using them. Now, occasionally a new one does slip up, but we've been putting chemicals and additives in our food for the last 50 years,
Right.
you know? Now, some of those additives have been crazy inventions like processed cheese, you know? I mean, I'm just saying that was like mind-blowing at the
Right.
time. Even going further back, think about the Kellogg brothers who invented cereal. That was a product nobody had ever seen before. Okay? So food innovation does happen all the time, but it doesn't necessarily always involve new products.
Yeah.
Or does it? Well, you may be familiar with a product called Tera flour. Okay? Never heard of that one? Well, it is a gluten-free flour that was used in a product put out by Daily Harvest. Daily Harvest is a very health oriented type company. They send out products that are like shelf stable or freezer, foods, and they're very expensive. Okay, let me just tell you, they're very, very expensive. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of their products, which was a French lentil and leek crumble, which that right there already tells me this is kind of like a plant-based substitute. I'm guessing this is similar. Whenever you say crumble like this reminds me of like a sausage. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And the problem is that this product used Tera flour, and this product ended up being voluntarily recalled because 393 illnesses were reported over 39 states, and about 30 people had to have their gallbladders removed.
Oh
So
my
we're
God.
talking some serious issues here.
Right.
Now, the symptoms ranged anywhere from gastrointestinal issues to liver problems. And I mean, this was a pretty big deal, and there is actually still some lawsuits pending about
Ooh.
this. But because of this outbreak, even though they were not able with 100% certainty to pin this outbreak on Tera flour,
Yeah.
they actually changed Tera flour status with the FDA. The FDA determined that there is not enough data on the use of Tera flour in food or a history of its safe use, so it is no longer considered generally recognized as safe. So you kind of think that just because something gets a GRAS label that it stays that way,
Right.
but that's not always true. But unfortunately, 393 people have to get injured first.
Ugh.
And we've already talked about that just because 393 people reported it, odds are good 2 to 3 times that amount actually got sick.
Right.
So this is one of those where I'm more pissed off that they've been able to do this for 30 years than I am of them trying to close the loophole. And are they going to go back and, you know, like, what's the deal? I mean, it's kind of like when they banned Red 3, you know? I mean, we allowed it in this, but we didn't allow it in that. And now we're taking a look at the research 20 years later and going, oh, maybe we shouldn't use that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
No, I
oh,
appreciate that we're re-examining some of the things. I think the timing of it is kind of interesting that we're adding further regulations at a time where we're decreasing the amount of employees at that agency. So
yeah.
I appreciate the sentiment, but I think it's going to be difficult to implement for a number of reasons. The amount of kickback and lawsuits that are going to come, just a litigation to thwart some of this is going to probably be pretty high. And then on top of that, just the inability to regulate and make it happen.
And that's kind of the issue, you know? So they just slashed a bunch of jobs, specifically food safety jobs at the FDA.
Yep.
But now, if they close this loophole, the FDA is going to have to start doing a whole lot more work. So it's like, how do you take on all this extra work, but you don't have the employees to do that? And that's where I think um, DOGE has some issues here, because you can't go scorched earth and then expect whoever's left over to just pick up the pieces and continue at the same exact level
It's,
of, services.
yeah.
Now, I mean, I unfortunately, I find this going to be like wishful thinking,
Yeah. Yeah.
that because what happens if a company submits a product and the FDA has to approve it? I mean, what if it takes them 3 years? You know, a food manufacturer is not going to want to sit there and twiddle their thumbs for 3 years on an ingredient.
Oh,
And
100%
so
not.
basically, that's going to stymie food innovation. You know, if you can't use a new spice or a new product, because you don't want to be the first one to contact the FDA about it. You want to be the second or third guy,
Right.
because then it's already been approved and you can just piggyback off of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're not the one spearheading and trying to create a new product. Because if you're the one who's putting your money and time and people into this
Research and
product,
development.
right, for it to sit on a shelf for 3 years, 2 years, even a year is a long time
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things. So like to say our normal timeline is 1 and you double it to 2, like we're looking at and are we reevaluating things that have already been through, or are we just talking about new innovations?
Yeah,
So
because I mean, if we're going back 30 years, we could have a whole bunch of stuff. And then what happens if they find that something is potentially dangerous? Are they going to retroactively recall all these products and change? There wasn't that many products being made with Tera flour,
right.
but because of this ruling, all food products had to no longer be used with Tera flour. So it didn't just affect Daily Harvest; it affected multiple companies. But I mean, just think about all the products out there with red dye number 3. You
Yeah.
know, that ban, once it goes into effect, that's a lot of products. And right now those companies have some time to start thinking of other coloring agents,
Yeah.
that they can use. But I really think this could, in some ways, keep innovation from even happening. Because there's already so much theft, like intellectual theft in
Right.
food service. So why would you want to be an innovator when you can just go around stealing everybody else's idea after they do all the hard work of getting it approved?
God, isn't that the
Especially if there's a
American way?
3-year wait.
Welcome to America.
Yeah, pretty much. We are all about the go get me some money.
Hmm.
So let us know down below. What do you think about this loophole and RFK Jr. trying to close it? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it might have unintended consequences? And how in the heck is the FDA even going to handle this when, they're down a bunch of people for efficiency's sake? So let us know what you think down below.